The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast metal flower, its curved walls rising high above the assembled delegates. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the seats, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some floated in tanks of glowing liquid, others stood tall as trees with crystalline bark, and many more sat in shapes that defied easy description. In a modest section near the middle, the human delegation occupied their assigned seats. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat straight-backed in her simple dark suit, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. Around her, 12 other humans waited quietly, their hands folded, their faces calm. They looked small compared to the towering Zephyrians with their shimmering wings, or the massive rock-like granite lords who needed special platforms to support their weight. The debate had been going on for 6 hours. Trade Minister Calyx of the Zephyrians was speaking again, his voice carrying clearly through the translation devices that each delegate wore. His words painted humans as a useful but limited species, good for basic work, but lacking the vision and intelligence of the truly advanced civilizations. The human expansion request threatens the cultural integrity of Sector 7, Calyx declared, his wings catching the light as he gestured. These beings, while hard-working, lack the sophistication to understand the delicate balance of interstellar relations. We must protect the established order. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Aquatic Collective's representative bubbled something in their water-filled sphere that the translators rendered as enthusiastic support. The silicon-based miners, despite being barely acknowledged by most council members, nodded their massive heads in agreement. Ambassador Vasquez watched it all with quiet eyes. She had seen this coming for months. The restrictions had been growing tighter, the attitudes more dismissive. Humanity had been granted membership in the Galactic Council 50 years ago, but they had never truly been welcomed. They were tolerated, used, and increasingly resented for reasons that seemed to change depending on who was speaking. The Luxorian trade representative stood next, his 6 arms moving in flowing patterns as he spoke. Humans serve an important function in our galaxy. They maintain our systems, handle our logistics, and perform the necessary but simple tasks that keep our civilization running. But expansion? Leadership roles? These require wisdom that comes from millions of years of evolution, not the mere thousands that humans have existed. More agreement from the assembled aliens. The Cathari president, Zix-9, clicked his mandibles in what passed for approval among his species. His compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as he prepared to call for the vote. The motion before us, Zix-9 announced, his mechanical voice echoing through the chamber, is to restrict human expansion beyond their current 23 systems. All those in favor? Lights began blinking throughout the chamber as delegates registered their votes. Elena watched the tally display with no change in expression. She had counted votes before the session began and knew exactly how this would end. The final count appeared on the massive screen. 734 in favor, 113 against, 15 abstaining. The chamber erupted in satisfied clicking, humming, and bubbling from the winning side. A few delegates from smaller species looked uncomfortable, but they remained silent. The humans sat perfectly still. Zix-9 raised one clawed hand for silence. The motion passes. Human expansion is restricted to their current systems. This will preserve the stability and cultural heritage of our galaxy. Elena stood slowly. The movement was so quiet that at first, only nearby delegates noticed. Gradually, silence spread through the chamber as beings turned to watch the human ambassador. The Terran Federation acknowledges this decision, Elena said, her voice clear and calm. She did not need to shout. The chamber's acoustics carried her words to every corner. We have served this council faithfully for 50 years. We have maintained your infrastructure, solved your technical problems, and carried out the work that keeps this great civilization functioning. She paused, looking around the chamber with steady eyes. But we understand that our presence here is no longer desired. Therefore, the Terran Federation will be departing council space within one standard galactic cycle. A ripple of surprise went through the chamber, but it was muted. Most delegates seemed relieved rather than concerned. The humans were finally admitting their proper place in the galactic order. "You cannot simply leave," protested the Altarian military commander, his metallic body reflecting the chamber's lights. "You have contracts, obligations." "All contracts will be fulfilled or terminated according to their terms," Elena replied. "All human personnel will be withdrawn. All human-operated facilities will be transferred to Council authority, or shut down, as you prefer." She gathered her documents with careful precision. The other human delegates followed her lead, standing and preparing to leave. There was no anger in their movements, no dramatic gestures or harsh words. They moved with the same quiet efficiency they had always shown. Trade Minister Kalux laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a breeze. "Where will you go, humans? Back to your little corner of space to nurse your wounded pride? You need us more than we need you." Elena stopped at the chamber's exit and turned back one final time. "We will manage, Minister Kalux. We always have." As the human delegation left the chamber, conversations resumed almost immediately. The Zephyrians discussed new trade routes that would no longer be complicated by human expansion. The Luxorians made plans to take over human-managed facilities. The Granite Lords rumbled about mining rights and systems that would soon be available. Only a few delegates seemed troubled by what had just happened. A young Kepler scientist named Dr. Vex had spent considerable time working with human researchers. She knew firsthand how much the humans actually accomplished, how many problems they solved that never made it into official reports. "This seems unwise," she whispered to her delegation leader. "Nonsense," the elder Kepler replied. "Humans are useful workers, but they lack true innovation. We can replace them easily enough." In the days that followed, human ships began appearing at the edges of Council space. Not warships or grand vessels, but the simple transport ships and maintenance craft that had been quietly moving throughout the galaxy for decades. They arrived at human outposts, space stations, and work sites throughout Council territory. The evacuation was methodical and thorough. Human families packed their belongings and departed from worlds where they had lived for generations. Human engineers handed over technical manuals and access codes before shutting down their workstations. For the final time, human diplomats closed their offices and transmitted final reports. Most aliens barely noticed the departures. Humans had always been quiet, after all. They came and went without fanfare, doing their work and keeping to themselves. If anything, their absence might make things more efficient by eliminating the need to coordinate with such a simple-minded species. The last human ship left Council space exactly one cycle after Ambassador Vasquez's announcement. It was a small transport vessel carrying the final maintenance crew from a communication relay station near the galactic core. As it jumped to faster-than-light speed and disappeared among the stars, it left behind a galaxy that was confident in its decision. The great civilizations of the Galactic Council had finally freed themselves from the burden of accommodating humanity. They could now focus on the important work of advanced beings, unencumbered by the limitations of a primitive species. They had no idea what they had just lost. 3 months after the last human ship disappeared beyond the rim of Council space, the first problems began to appear. They started small, the kind of minor inconveniences that advanced civilizations simply worked around. A delay here, a malfunction. There nothing that seemed connected or particularly worrying. Captain Rylux of the Luxorian merchant fleet noticed it first. His cargo runs between the core worlds and the outer systems had always followed precise schedules, timed down to the minute. The Luxorians prided themselves on their punctuality, and their trade routes were the envy of the galaxy. But now, something was wrong. The automated waypoint beacons that guided ships through hyperspace were responding slowly. Messages that should have updated instantly took hours to process. Navigation computers that had worked flawlessly for decades were giving inconsistent readings. "It's probably just a software glitch," his engineer Jex assured him as they sat in the ship's bridge staring at error messages that made no sense. "These systems are old. Maybe they need updating." Rylux nodded, but he remembered something that bothered him. The last time their navigation system had been serviced, it had been a human technician who did the work. A quiet woman named Sarah, who had spent 3 days crawling through access panels, making tiny adjustments that she claimed would improve efficiency. At the time, Rylux had barely paid attention. Human technicians were everywhere, doing the basic maintenance that kept things running. They were so common that most aliens forgot they existed until something needed fixing. Now, as Jack struggled with diagnostic programs that couldn't identify the problems, Rylux wondered if those tiny adjustments had been more important than anyone realized. The communication problems were worse on Zephyr Prime, the gleaming capital world of the Zephyrian Federation. Minister Kalux stood in the crystal spire that housed the quantum communication network, watching technicians work frantically at control panels that flickered with warning lights. "Status report," he demanded, his wings rustling with annoyance. Chief Technician Azul looked up from a display covered in red error symbols. "The network is degrading, Minister. We're losing connection with relay stations throughout the outer sectors. Response time has increased by 300% in the past week." "That's impossible," Kalux snapped. "This is Zephyrian technology, the most advanced communication system in the galaxy. How can it be failing?" Azul hesitated before answering. "Sir, I've been reviewing the maintenance records. The relay stations were all built using our designs, but they were actually constructed and maintained by human contractors. We assumed it was simple installation work following our specifications. And the relay stations aren't responding to our standard repair protocols. It's like they were modified in ways that aren't documented anywhere." Kalux stared at the technician in disbelief. The quantum communication network was Zephyrian, developed by their greatest scientists, a marvel of advanced physics that primitive humans couldn't possibly understand. The idea that humans had modified it was absurd, but the evidence was right, there on the screens. Relay stations that should have been identical to the original specifications were behaving in ways that made no sense according to Zephyrian physics. Somehow human engineers had made changes that actually improved performance beyond what the original design should have allowed. Now, without human maintenance crews, those improvements were breaking down. The relay stations were reverting to their basic design specifications, which were apparently insufficient for the actual demands placed on them. The agricultural world of Verdania Prime faced a different but equally puzzling crisis. The planet fed 17 different star systems using automated farming arrays that stretched across entire continents. The system had been designed by the HFY brilliant botanical collective and had functioned perfectly for over a century, until now. Harvest Coordinator Quen stood in the central control facility surrounded by displays showing crop yields that made no sense. Fields that should have been producing maximum output were generating only 60% of expected results. Soil nutrient levels were fluctuating wildly. Irrigation systems were delivering too much water in some areas and not enough in others. "Have we been hit by some kind of disease?" Quen asked the chief botanist, Dr. Fem. "No signs of any pathogens," Dr. Fem replied, her tentacles waving over a tablet displaying soil analysis data. "The crops are healthy, the soil is good, the weather has been ideal, but something is wrong with the automation systems. Run a full diagnostic." "We've run 12 diagnostics. Everything tests normal. The systems are working exactly as they were designed to work." That statement hung in the air like an accusation. Working as designed, but not working correctly. Quen pulled up the facility's maintenance records and felt a cold sensation in his digestive chambers. For the past 30 years, the automated systems had been serviced by a rotating crew of human agricultural technicians. Their reports had been brief and professional. Systems functioning within normal parameters. Minor calibrations performed. No issues detected. But now Quen wondered what those minor calibrations had actually involved. The human technicians had worked on every farming array on the planet, making tiny adjustments that they claimed were routine maintenance. Their work had never been questioned because the results spoke for themselves. Crop yields had actually improved year after year. Now, without those constant minor calibrations, the systems were operating according to their original programming. And apparently their original programming wasn't good enough for the complex realities of large-scale agriculture. The problems weren't limited to individual worlds or systems. Throughout Council space, the evidence was mounting that humans had been far more involved in maintaining galactic civilization than anyone had realized. On the mining world of Karis 9, extraction equipment designed by the Granite Lords was breaking down at alarming rates. The repair manuals existed, written in precise technical language, but alien engineers couldn't replicate the results that human maintenance crews had achieved for decades. The Altarian military discovered that their most advanced warships required constant attention from specialists who understood not just how the systems were supposed to work, but how they actually worked under real conditions. Those specialists had been human engineers who had learned through years of hands-on experience. Financial networks that had operated smoothly for centuries began experiencing wild fluctuations. Market crashes that should have been impossible started happening with increasing frequency. Investigation revealed that the trading algorithms contained subtle subroutines that had been installed by human programmers, designed to prevent exactly the kind of instability that was now occurring. In his office high above the council chambers, President Zix-9 reviewed reports from across council space. Each document described different problems, different systems failing, different crises emerging. But they all had one thing in common. They involved infrastructure that had been maintained or modified by humans. "This is coincidence," he told his aide, Secretary Lix. "These are unrelated technical problems. Advanced civilizations always face such challenges." But even as he spoke, Zix-9 felt doubt creeping into his mind. He had been proud of the Council's decision to restrict human expansion. It had seemed like the wise choice of superior beings protecting their rightful place in the galaxy. Now he was beginning to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. Not because humans were more advanced than he had thought, but because they had been far more useful than anyone had realized. The great civilizations of the galaxy had always focused on the big picture: grand strategies, advanced theories, revolutionary technologies. They had left the mundane work of actually making things function to lesser species, particularly humans. But mundane work was starting to look much more important than it had before. Without human engineers making tiny adjustments, Zephyrian communication networks were failing. Without human programmers writing stability algorithms, financial markets were crashing. Without human technicians performing routine maintenance, everything from starships to farming equipment was breaking down. 3 months ago, the Council had been confident that they were getting rid of a primitive species that had outlived its usefulness. Now they were starting to realize that they might have driven away the very beings who had been keeping their civilization running. And the humans were gone, disappeared beyond the galactic rim without leaving any way to contact them. The great civilizations of the Council were about to learn just how much they had depended on the quiet competence of beings they had considered beneath their notice. 6 months after humanity's quiet departure, the problems had evolved from annoying inconveniences to critical emergencies. What had started as minor technical glitches was now threatening the very foundation of galactic civilization. High Admiral, 4th of the Altarian Fleet, stood on the bridge of the battleship Eternal Glory, staring at diagnostic screens that told an impossible story. The massive warship, pride of the Altarian military and terror of their enemies, was dead in space. Its engines were silent, its weapons offline, its shields down to emergency power. "Report," Vorth commanded, his metallic voice echoing through the bridge. Chief Engineer Klex approached with obvious reluctance. "Sir, we've identified the problem. The fusion reactors are functioning perfectly, but the power distribution system isn't responding to our control inputs. The diagnostic programs say everything is working normally, but we're only getting 12% power to critical systems. That's impossible. Altarian engineering is flawless." "Yes, sir. That's what makes this so confusing." Klex hesitated. "Sir, I've been reviewing the maintenance records. The power distribution system was completely rebuilt 4 years ago by human contractors. They said they were upgrading it for better efficiency." Forth's optical sensors focused on the engineer with sudden intensity. "Human contractors modified our most advanced warship?" "Not just this ship, sir. According to fleet records, human engineering teams have worked on every vessel in the fleet over the past decade, always with proper authorization, always following Altarian specifications, but now that they're gone, the implications hit Vorth like a plasma blast. The entire Altarian fleet, the most feared military force in the galaxy, was dependent on modifications made by beings they had considered barely intelligent enough to handle basic repairs. Without human maintenance crews, their warships were becoming expensive pieces of space junk. The situation was even worse in the Morvek hegemony's industrial sectors. Mining Director Bren stood in the control center of Asteroid Mining Station 7, watching 17 different mining operations shut down simultaneously. The massive equipment that carved through solid rock and extracted precious metals had simply stopped working. "What's the status on the repair teams?" Bren asked his supervisor. "That's the problem," Supervisor Gax replied. "Our engineers can't figure out what's wrong. The equipment appears to be functioning correctly according to all specifications, but it won't operate." Bren pulled up the technical manuals on his screen, scrolling through hundreds of pages of detailed instructions for maintaining and repairing the mining equipment. Everything seemed straightforward enough. Replace this component when it wears out. Adjust these settings for different types of rock. Follow these procedures for routine maintenance. But somehow, when Morvek engineers followed the manuals exactly, the equipment didn't work. It was as if the manuals were missing crucial information, steps that had been so obvious to the original writers that they hadn't bothered to include them. "Get me the maintenance history for all our mining operations," Bren ordered. The data that came back told a story that Bren was beginning to expect. For 20 years, the hegemony's mining equipment had been serviced by human contractor teams. Their reports were always brief and professional. Maintenance completed, equipment operating at optimal efficiency, no significant issues. But apparently, those simple maintenance reports concealed a vast amount of practical knowledge about how to actually make the equipment work in real-world conditions. Knowledge that had never been written down anywhere because the humans had simply shown up, done their work, and left. Now the equipment was breaking down faster than Morvek engineers could fix it, and every repair attempt seemed to make things worse. The hegemony's industrial output was dropping by the day. The financial crisis was spreading even faster than the infrastructure failures. On the trading world of Commerce Prime, market coordinator Yex watched in horror as the galactic economy experienced its third major crash in 2 weeks. Trillions of credits in value were disappearing as trading algorithms went haywire, making bizarre decisions that destroyed entire sectors overnight. "How is this possible?" Yex demanded of his team of financial experts. "These are the most advanced trading systems in the galaxy. They're designed to prevent exactly this kind of instability." Chief Analyst Rux was hunched over a terminal, examining code that scrolled past too quickly for most beings to follow. "Sir, I've found something disturbing. The main trading algorithms contain thousands of subroutines that aren't documented in any of our technical manuals. They appear to be monitoring market conditions and making micro-adjustments to prevent crashes." Subroutines written by whom? According to the code comments, they were created by human programmers over the past 15 years. Each one is designed to handle specific market conditions that could lead to instability. Yex felt a cold sensation in his primary stomach. "Are you telling me that our entire financial system was dependent on human programmers?" "Not just dependent, sir. Enhanced. These subroutines have been preventing crashes that should have happened dozens of times over the past decade. Without them, our markets are experiencing the natural instability that the original systems were never designed to handle." The pattern was repeating across the galaxy. On every world, in every system, infrastructure that had worked flawlessly for decades was falling apart. And in every case, investigation revealed the same disturbing truth. Humans had been far more involved in maintaining galactic civilization than anyone had realized. They hadn't just been following instructions or performing simple maintenance. They had been problem solvers, innovators, and fixers, quietly improving systems that their alien employers thought were already perfect. They had been the invisible engineers who made everything actually work, rather than just work in theory. Dr. Vex, the young Kepler scientist, found herself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. She had worked closely with human researchers and had always been impressed by their practical approach to complex problems. While Kepler scientists focused on elegant theories, humans had focused on making those theories work in the real world. Now she was part of a desperate investigation into the growing crisis. Her team had been tasked with figuring out how to restore the quantum communication network that was failing throughout the galaxy. "The problem is subtle," she explained to her colleagues. "The relay stations were built according to Zephyrian specifications, but human contractors made thousands of small modifications. Each change was individually minor, but together they created a system that performed far better than the original design. So, we just need to identify the modifications and maintain them ourselves," suggested Dr. Korth, her supervisor. "That's what we thought. But the modifications are interconnected in ways that we don't fully understand. When we try to repair one component, it affects 12 others. The humans seem to have redesigned the entire network as a single integrated system, rather than a collection of individual relay stations." Dr. Korth looked puzzled. "But humans aren't intelligent enough for that kind of system-wide thinking. They're good at following instructions, not creating complex designs." Dr. Vex hesitated before responding. She was beginning to suspect that the Council's understanding of human intelligence had been completely wrong. But saying so would be challenging the fundamental assumptions that had guided galactic civilization for decades. The crisis was also revealing problems that went beyond technical failures. Without human mediators and translators, diplomatic relations between different species were becoming increasingly strained. The Zephyrians and the Crystalline Collective had severed trade relations over a misunderstanding that would normally have been resolved in minutes. Ambassador Thek of the Rigelian Assembly was reviewing diplomatic records when he made a disturbing discovery. For the past 30 years, every major diplomatic breakthrough had involved human negotiators working behind the scenes, not as leaders or representatives, but as facilitators who helped different species understand each other. Humans had served as translators not just of language but of cultural concepts that other species found difficult to grasp. They had mediated disputes, suggested compromises, and found creative solutions to seemingly impossible problems. Now, without human diplomats, to smooth over misunderstandings, ancient rivalries were resurging. Species that had cooperated for generations were remembering old grievances. The careful balance of relationships that held the galaxy together was falling apart. President Zix-9 found himself facing a crisis unlike anything in the Council's history. Infrastructure was failing, the economy was crashing, diplomatic relations were breaking down, and his government was being blamed for all of it. "We need to contact the humans," he told his council of advisors. "Whatever it takes, we need to bring them back." "Sir," Secretary Lix replied carefully, "we've been trying to contact them for weeks. They left no forwarding address, no communication, protocols, no way to reach them. They've disappeared completely beyond the galactic rim." "Then send ships to find them." "We've tried that too. Our long-range scouts can't locate any human." 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council was no longer the mighty organization that had once governed 800 worlds. Half of the member species had withdrawn from major treaties. Trade routes that had operated for centuries were abandoned. Entire sectors had gone dark, their communication networks too degraded to maintain contact with the galactic core. President Zix-9 stood before an emergency session of what remained of the Council. The great chamber that had once been filled with delegates from across the galaxy now echoed with empty spaces. Less than 300 representatives had attended, and many of those were here only to announce their departure from Council authority. "The situation report," Zix-9 began, his mechanical voice carrying a weariness that hadn't been there a year ago. He gestured to the massive display screen that showed a map of Council space. Large sections were marked in red, systems experiencing critical infrastructure failures. Yellow indicated partial system breakdowns. Green showed areas still functioning normally, and there weren't many green sections left. Secretary General Lix approached the podium with a tablet full of data that painted an even bleaker picture. Then the visual display. Total agricultural output is down 45% across Council space. 17 worlds are facing food shortages. The Verdania farming systems that once fed dozens of star systems are operating at 30% capacity. Murmurs of concern rippled through the chamber. Many of these delegates represented worlds that depended on Verdanian agriculture. Industrial production has fallen by 60%, Lix continued. The Morvek mining operations that supplied raw materials for half the galaxy have been reduced to basic extraction only. Their advanced processing facilities are non-functional. The Granite Lord representative, his massive stone form crackling as he moved, spoke for the first time in months. Our people are starving. Our machines are broken. This council has failed us. Transportation networks have collapsed by 70%. Lix pressed on, ignoring the interruption. The Luxorian merchant fleets that once moved goods efficiently throughout the galaxy are experiencing delays of weeks instead of days. Many routes have been abandoned entirely due to navigation system failures. Trade Minister Kalux of the Zephyrians, who had been one of the strongest advocates for human restrictions, now looked defeated. His beautiful crystalline wings had lost their luster and his voice lacked its usual confidence. The quantum communication network is operating at 25% capacity. Some outer systems haven't been contacted in months. We don't even know if they still exist. The financial data was even worse. Market Coordinator Yex transmitted his report directly to the delegates' tablets rather than speaking it aloud. The numbers were too devastating to say out loud. The galactic economy had lost 80% of its value in a series of cascading crashes. Entire civilizations that had been wealthy were now struggling to afford basic necessities. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. A joint investigation team led by Dr. Vex had been working for months to understand exactly what humans had been doing throughout Council space. Their findings challenged everything the Council had believed about human intelligence and capability. Dr. Vex approached the podium with obvious reluctance. She had requested that her report be classified, but President Zix-9 had insisted that the full Council needed to hear the truth. Our investigation has revealed that human involvement in galactic infrastructure was far more extensive than previously understood, she began. We found evidence that humans had made significant improvements to systems across every sector of Council space. She activated a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional model of the galaxy, with thousands of glowing connections between different systems. These lines represent infrastructure modifications made by human contractors over the past 50 years. As you can see, they form an interconnected network that spans the entire galaxy. The display was breathtaking in its complexity. The connections between systems formed patterns that were almost artistic in their elegance, revealing a level of system-wide thinking that most species couldn't achieve. The humans weren't just maintaining our technology, Dr. Vex continued. They were redesigning it. Every system they touched was improved in ways that we're only beginning to understand. They created redundancies, efficiency improvements, and stability enhancements that turned our individual technologies into a unified galactic infrastructure. Ambassador Thek stood up, his Rigelian features twisted with what might have been shame. Dr. Vex, are you saying that humans redesigned our entire civilization without us realizing it? That appears to be exactly what happened, Ambassador. They did it quietly, gradually, over decades. Each individual change was small enough to go unnoticed, but collectively they transformed how everything worked. President Zix-9 felt something that he had never experienced before: genuine humility. How is this possible? Humans were primitive compared to our advanced species. Dr. Vex hesitated before answering. This was the part of her report that would be hardest for the Council to accept. Sir, I believe our assessment of human intelligence was fundamentally flawed. They aren't less intelligent than we are. They're intelligent in different ways. She changed the holographic display to show comparative analysis charts. Most of our species excel at theoretical thinking, advanced physics, or specialized areas of knowledge. But humans excel at systems thinking, practical problem-solving, and integration of complex variables. They see connections between things that we miss. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed this information. For thousands of years, galactic civilization had been built on the assumption that intelligence could be ranked. with some species naturally superior to others. The idea that humans might be equally intelligent, just differently intelligent, challenged the entire social order. "There's more," Dr. Vex said reluctantly. "We found evidence that humans had been preparing for their departure for decades. They created backup systems, alternative supply chains, and redundant infrastructure outside of council space. They knew this day would come." She showed the next display. Intelligence reports from the Galactic Rim showing signs of human activity in regions that had been considered empty space. Construction projects, mining operations, agricultural developments, all hidden beyond the more edge of known space. "They weren't just quietly improving our civilization," Dr. Vex concluded. "They were quietly building their own." The implications were staggering. While the great species of the galaxy had been focused on politics and prestige, humans had been planning for independence. They had spent decades creating the infrastructure necessary to survive on their own, all while continuing to maintain the systems that kept council space functioning. Trade Minister Kelux spoke into the stunned silence. "How long have they been planning this?" "Based on the evidence, at least 30 years, Dr. Vex replied. "Possibly longer. They began establishing hidden outposts and supply chains shortly after joining the council. They must have realized even then that their membership here was temporary." The final piece of the investigation was perhaps the most disturbing. A review of diplomatic records revealed that humans had been the invisible mediators of galactic politics for decades. Every major treaty, every successful negotiation, every peaceful resolution of conflict had involved human diplomats working quietly in the background. Humans served as cultural translators, Ambassador Thek reported to the Assembly. They understood how different species thought and communicated in ways that we never appreciated. They could explain Zephyrian logic to granite lords or Rigelian customs to aquatic collectives. Without them, we're discovering that we don't really understand each other at all. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The species that the Council had dismissed as primitive manual laborers had actually been the engineers, diplomats, and problem solvers who held galactic civilization together. They had been so good at their work that they had made themselves invisible, allowing other species to take credit for achievements that were actually human accomplishments. President Zix-9 finally spoke the words that everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to say. "We need them back. Whatever it takes, whatever concessions we have to make, we need to bring the humans back." "Sir," Secretary Lick said quietly, "our long-range scouts still haven't found them. They've established settlements, beyond our sensor range, possibly beyond the galaxy itself. Even if we could contact them, why would they want to return?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Why would humans want to return to a civilization that had treated them as second-class citizens, dismissed their intelligence, and ultimately expelled them for being too successful? "We offer them anything they want," Zix-9 declared. "Full membership, expanded territory, leadership positions, anything." "With respect, sir," Dr. Vex interjected, "I don't think it's that simple. According to our psychological profiles, humans value respect and cooperation above status and territory. We didn't just restrict their expansion, we dismissed their worth as a species. That's not something that can be fixed with political concessions." 2 years after the human exodus, a small council expedition finally located them. The journey to the Galactic Rim had taken months, following sensor traces and scattered reports from independent traders who claimed to have seen human ships in the void between galaxies. Captain Kix of the Council research vessel Unity stood on his bridge, staring at the scanner displays that showed something impossible. Where there should have been empty space, there was a thriving civilization. Space stations dotted the darkness like jewels, connected by streams of traffic that spoke of busy trade routes. Massive construction projects were visible even at this distance, what appeared to be entire worlds being built from scratch. "How many ships are we detecting?" Kix asked his sensor operator. "Over 10,000, Captain. And those are just the ones in immediate sensor range. The construction signatures suggest much larger populations further out." Ambassador Thek, who had volunteered to lead this desperate diplomatic mission, studied the readings with amazement. "They've built all this in 2 years?" "Actually, sir," the sensor operator replied, Based on the construction patterns and energy signatures, some of these installations appear much older. They may have been building out here for decades. The truth was even more remarkable than they had imagined. As the Unity approached the outer edge of human space, they were met by an escort of sleek ships that bore familiar human designs, but incorporated technology that the Council didn't recognize. The ships were clearly more advanced than anything humanity had possessed when they left Council space. They were guided to a massive space station that served as a diplomatic hub. The design was unmistakably human, functional, efficient, without the ornate decorations that other species favored. But the scale was breathtaking, larger than any single structure the Council had ever built. Ambassador Elena Vasquez met them in a docking bay that was busy with activity. Beings of dozens of species worked alongside humans, their cooperation so natural that it was clear this wasn't a recent arrangement. Many of the species were familiar, former Council members who had quietly disappeared over the past 2 years. But there were others that Thek didn't recognize at all. Small insect-like beings who moved with precise efficiency. Tall, plant-like creatures that seemed to communicate through chemical signals. Even some of the supposedly extinct species that the Council had written off as evolutionary failures. Ambassador, Thek, Elena said, approaching with the same calm professionalism she had shown in the Council chambers 2 years earlier. Welcome to Horizon Station. I understand you wish to speak with us. She looked older, but not in a way that suggested hardship. If anything, she seemed more confident, more settled than she had during her years representing humanity to the Council. Behind her, the busy activity of the docking bay continued without interruption, beings working together with an efficiency that the Council had never achieved. Ambassador Vasquez, Thek replied, trying to match her diplomatic tone. We come on behalf of the Galactic Council to discuss the current crisis affecting our space. I'm no longer an ambassador, Mr. Thek. I serve as Director of External Relations for the Terran Federation and our allied systems. But I'm happy to listen to what you have to say. They were escorted to a conference room that offered a stunning view of the construction projects taking place nearby. Through the transparent walls, Thek could see what appeared to be an entire world being assembled from prefabricated sections. Ships from dozens of species were contributing materials and workers to the project. This is remarkable, Captain Kix admitted. How have you accomplished so much in such a short time? Elena smiled. We had good teachers. Every species that has joined us has contributed their unique capabilities. The tiny builders, who the Council considered too small to be useful, have revolutionized our construction techniques. The silicon-based miners, who were too slow for your fast-paced economy, have become the backbone of our heavy industry. She gestured toward the window where a group of insect-like beings were assembling delicate electronic components with impossible precision. The Hive Collective was declared extinct by your xenobiologists 50 years ago. It turns out they were just hiding, waiting for someone to appreciate their abilities. Thek realized that what he was seeing represented a completely different approach to interspecies cooperation. The Council had always been built around hierarchy, with advanced species governing lesser ones. But this civilization seemed to be built around complementary abilities, with each species contributing what they did best. We need your help, Thek said, abandoning diplomatic protocol for direct honesty. Our civilization is collapsing. Infrastructure is failing throughout Council space. Our economy has crashed. Some worlds are facing starvation. I'm sorry to hear that, Elena replied, and she seemed genuinely sympathetic. We've been monitoring Council communications, so we're aware of the difficulties you're facing. Then you know why we're here. The Council is prepared to offer full membership to humanity, with expanded territory and leadership positions. We can give you seats on the ruling council, veto power over major decisions, anything you want. Elena was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the busy construction projects surrounding the station. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. Mr. Thek, with respect, you're still thinking in terms of the old system. Membership in your council, seats on your ruling body, leadership positions in your hierarchy. You're offering us a place in the organization that expelled us for being too successful. The Council realizes it made a mistake, Thick insisted. We understand now how valuable humanity is to galactic civilization. We want to make amends. Do you? Elena asked. Or do you want us to come back and fix your problems so you can go back to the way things were? The question hung in the air, like a challenge. Thek wanted to protest, to insist that the Council had truly learned from its mistakes, but he knew that Elena was right. The Council wanted humanity back because they needed them, not because they respected them. What would it take? Captain Kix asked quietly. What would convince you to help us? Elena stood and walked to another window that showed a different view of human space. Here, ships from species that Thek recognized as former Council members were arriving at what appeared to be a massive university complex. Captain, we're not refusing to help. We've been helping all along. Every species that has asked to join us has been welcomed. Every being that wanted to leave the Council system and find something better has found a home here. She turned back to face the delegation. The difference is that we're not trying to repair your civilization. We're building a new one. Based on what principles? Thek asked. Based on the idea that every species has something valuable to contribute, and that cooperation works better than domination. Based on the belief that intelligence comes in many forms, and that diversity makes us stronger rather than weaker. She activated a holographic display that showed the scope of what they had built. The new civilization extended far beyond what the Council expedition had detected, reaching into the void between galaxies and establishing outposts on the far side of neighboring star systems. We've been contacted by species from other galaxies, Elena explained. It turns out that the Council model of hierarchy and dominance isn't unique. Many civilizations eventually face the same problems you're experiencing now. But there are alternatives. The display showed trade routes and communication networks that spanned distances the Council had never dreamed of reaching. This wasn't just a human civilization. It was an intergalactic alliance based on principles that the Council had never considered. You could join us, Elena offered. Any species that wants to can leave Council space and find a place here. We don't turn anyone away, and we don't rank species by their supposed level of advancement. What about our worlds, our infrastructure, our people who can't leave? Thek asked. We'll provide humanitarian aid to anyone who needs it, Elena replied. Food, medical supplies, technical assistance. But we won't come back to Council space to prop up a system that we know doesn't work. You're condemning billions of beings to suffering, Captain Kix protested. No, Captain, we're offering them a better alternative. The choice is theirs to make. As the meeting continued, it became clear that humanity wasn't interested in returning to their old role as the invisible maintainers of someone else's civilization. They had built something new, something better, and they weren't willing to give it up to rescue the system that had rejected them. The final blow came when Elena showed them recordings from species throughout Council space, not the government representatives but ordinary beings. Workers, families, communities that were struggling with the collapse of their infrastructure. Many of them weren't asking for the Council to be fixed. They were asking how they could join the human alliance. The Botanical Collective has already begun relocating their agricultural operations to our space, Elena explained. The tiny builders have closed their workshops in Council territory and opened new ones here. Even some Zephyrians have requested permission to establish research facilities in our territory.